Hi folks, welcome to another edition of 12-Step Insights. My name is Emmanuel John. I'm a practicing therapist with more than 30 years in the addiction field. I'm also an author. You can look up here, there'll be a web address for the website if you're interested in the books, Addiction and Why They Use and Addiction and Why Powerless. One's for the family, one's for the substance-involved individual. Today we're looking at the 10th step, continue to take personal inventory, and when we were wrong, promptly admitted it. Years ago, the old timers used to say the program was uplifting. They'd say you show up, you clean up, you grow up, and then you help up. Now, the 10th step would obviously be in the grow up section. So the 10th step is really about taking all that you've learned, taking the principles and begin to practice them in your life, the principles being each step, the principle of each step, and to practice them in your daily life. When you're wrong, promptly admitted it. The 10th step is one of the few steps that reference a point in time by saying continued. Most of the other prior steps, and I have them written down, use words that are written in the past tense as if we had completed them and moved on from them. And those words are admitted, had, came, made, were, asked, sought, and having. And the 12th, having had. Sought in the 11th step is interesting because it also in that step uses the word improve. So it basically we sought to find how to improve, meaning we're going to continue to improve. So the 11th step would be considered a grow-up step as well. Really, it's about what to do with all these steps once you got them together. Remembering back that the original steps were 6 steps, and before that they were the 4 tenets of the Oxford group. So Bill is expanding these a little bit, and he also knew that he saw it happening around him, that the people who did not stay involved in the program or were not serious about the program would relapse and falter. So he wanted to put in a reference as to how we stay on the track, clean and sober, without getting ourselves into emotional problems or dilemmas where the risk of relapse would be increased, which would be through acting negatively or in having negative interactions with people. I had a friend once who was a mechanic, and he didn't like the word maintenance for the maintenance steps because he thought that no matter how well you did your maintenance on your vehicles, they eventually still failed. A motor was only going to last so long, and he didn't want his program to fade after time, and he wanted it to actually get better. And so he didn't like calling them the maintenance steps. And so he and I and some other people really referenced them as grow-up steps. And grow-up steps and grow closer to God steps being 10, 11, and 12. One interesting thing that the 10th step does is it sort of speeds up the process. So we don't have to literally go back and do 4, 5, 6, and 7, 8, 9 again with a situation. We can speed it up and sort of do it more concise into the 10th step. And the 10th step allows us to be done with the prior steps. We always hear people talk about going back and doing another 4th, doing another 5th step. What they're really referencing, and what Bill was referencing in the 10th step, was that process, that you don't need to go back to 4 and 5 because we have it in 10. You're going to continue to take personal inventory, and when you're wrong, promptly admitted it. As in admitted to God, to ourselves, and other human beings the exact nature of our wrongs. And obviously there's the inventory part, which is continue to take personal inventory. So he's trying to get us on a path of least resistance to help with relapse issues that might occur as a result of self-pity, sadness, shame, negative feelings about ourselves because of negative behaviors, negative interactions. He believed that these things would lead to difficulties, especially when it comes to resentments. So just to keep that stuff clean, if you have a negative interaction with someone, you go back to that person, try to work it out as best you can. Maybe talk about it with someone before you do that, and then go back and make amends or whatever it is that you think you might have to do to rectify the situation. It's my opinion that the 10th step is about learning how to keep our side of the street clean. It's like a house. If you let this go, you let that go, before you know it, your house is a mess. Well, he didn't want us to end up in that place or that condition, and I think he believed that we could live lives far better than average if we practice some of these principles in our daily lives. And taking the steps, each being a principle in and of itself, a spiritual principle, and applying them to our lives on a daily basis. 10 and 11 and 12 pretty much wrap up all those things, and I think that's why it was often referred to as a maintenance step. So we have our 4th step, inventory, our 5th step, admission when there's a problem, our 6th and 7th step, looking at the defects, humbly asking God to remove them, and then to move forward. There's nothing in the 10th step that suggests that God can't be involved in the step, because it doesn't really say who we admitted it to. It just says that we continue to take personal inventory, and when we were wrong, promptly admitted it. Admitted it to who? The same 3 people that we did before, ourselves, another human being, and to God. I believe that Bill thought that way after my years of profiling him. I am pretty certain that he was convinced of us taking all those actions in this short step. Maybe a prayer at the end of the night. I had a friend years ago, and she used to say that she had a prayer at the end of the night. She called her 10th step prayer to see if she was wrong or not. And she'd get down on her knees at night and say in her prayers, and she'd say, God, treat me tomorrow the way I treated everyone else today. Now think about that. God, treat me tomorrow the way I treated everybody else today. It's a tall order, and if you didn't treat people well, you're going to be asking God to do the same for you. It kept her on the straight and narrow. I think it's a neat way to look at this step. It's a sort of a concise prayer for the step. It's a really quick inventory, because if you say that at the end of your day, God, treat me tomorrow the way I treat everybody else today, you're going to look back and go, oh, except for Joe. I'm sorry about what I did to Joe. Please forgive me for that. I'll talk to Joe tomorrow and apologize. It's a really quick run through of the steps. It's got the will, it's got God's will, it's got surrender, it's got humility, it has honesty with ourselves, which is really important. It's also important to remember that when the steps were written, when the big book was written, there was one book on the planet that talked about this process, and it was the big book. And half of that book, only 164 pages of it, were really about the program. Yeah, the stories talk about how people interacted with the program and with other alcoholics at the time, but there was only half of a book that was really written outlining these steps. And Bill didn't think that he had it all figured out. That's why we have the other literature. That's why we have the 12 and 12. There's some people who say everything you need to know is in the first 164 pages of the big book. The traditions aren't in there. The word sponsor is not in the first 164 pages of the big book. I know right now some people are going, wait a minute. And they're going in there and look. Well, it's not. Trust me, save yourself the time. Do a word search if you have a program that does it. It's easier today than it was a long time ago to figure that out. So there are things that we've learned since then that are quite helpful with staying clean and sober. So the 10th step is about continuing to learn, not just for us, but to the whole program. Continue to take personal inventory when we were wrong, promptly admit it. Bill was suggesting that this was an open-ended thing, that we will know only a little, that more will be disclosed to you and to us. If you keep as long as your own house is in order, Bill referred to. This is keeping your house in order. So hopefully we'll still keep learning some more, and we'll see even deeper into what this step can provide for us over the years to come, and hopefully you will too. There are also these things called relapse traps, and there are things that we fall into, situations we fall into. Well, yeah, I cut that person off, or yeah, I did something wrong at that job, so I'm not going back over there. Or I work in a field where I'm going to be interacting with people that I used to work with. Cleaning these things up makes life easier. The easier life is, the less chance there is of relapse. The less resentment, the less bitterness, then the happier, more comfortable people that we are. I hope you find this helpful. Stay tuned. Be sure to check out the YouTube channel for the rest of the videos in this series. And this is the 10th, so we have 2 more to do. And then after that, we'll be going to answering the questions that people have submitted. So you can submit questions to the Facebook pages at Addiction Why They Use or Addiction Am I Powerless on Facebook pages. Or you can submit them to the YouTube page in the comment section, and I'll be sure to read them, but we'll be doing some videos on some of those questions that people have been asking. Thanks. Stay clean and sober, stay safe, and stay well, and thanks for tuning in.